Welcome to this study, which is intended to be the conclusion of the progressive stages of meditation. And I should say I really apologize that I haven't been able to do it on Mondays, but I found myself in front of practically exclusively an audience of new people. And you know, in this line of work, when you come across people who come with a genuine interest in the Buddhist teaching, then you actually want to really meet them where they're coming from. And that's where to present some of the intricacies of our discussion here might have been a little bit overwhelming. So I chose to make a very general presentation that sort of, you could say, touched to some extent implicitly on what we're talking about. But at the same time, you could say this discussion does deserve proper treatment in terms of being presented on its own particular terms. So, so I thought, okay, well, I can fit in Wednesday evenings. So my evenings, I think actually half of you here, if not more, you're all from Europe. So, anyway, Wednesdays. So, so here we are, and I'm very glad that you are here and interested in the subject matter. So as always, kindly generate the awakened attitude, which is recognizing the value of this in terms of our situation as sentient beings, wishing to ultimately establish all beings at the level of perfect enlightenment. So we're talking about the Shentong view. Now, the Shentong view very much comes from a place of, or rather is very much drawing on the third turning of the wheel. From the Shentong point of view, the third turning of the wheel, the teachings on Buddha nature, is the definitive, what we call the definitive meaning. And the teachings which we have in the second are seen as being expedient teachings, relative teachings, if you like. And there are different ways in which the Shentong is approached. But here then, mainly we understand the Shentong in this particular view. We have, for example, this is a discussion we're having in the study on Jamgön on the Thursday nights. In that there are certain ways in which the Shentong actually doesn't necessarily conflict with the way the general Madhyamika operates, or it's not really different. But they do take on a particular angle, which is very much that, and that is where the name draws what it draws on. When we say Shentong, it means empty of other, but it doesn't mean empty of itself. So that's the kind of the nature, and we mean here wisdom, the reflexive awareness, the uncontrived clarity, which is basic to cognition, is seen as being the only real thing. Function, if it really was real, which anything that's truly existent is necessarily cannot function. That's also valid. So they're both, in some way, we could actually approach both of these as understanding. One is coming more from, as I would put it, an ontological perspective. One is more from a phenomenological perspective, or the experience of awakening. But either way, we have a wealth in the discussions here, and so we shouldn't really think, oh, you know, what are they going on about? Because they're actually they're valid in terms of assessing the care that we should approach this subject matter with. So so anyway, the text itself then and we touched on this last time. I'll just go over it again. And this is touching on Buddha nature. So Buddha nature, you could say, is this nature which is always present, uncorrupted. When we talk about it in the general Mahayana sense, we talk about it in terms of potential. It's like the seed. It's inside, hidden within the veils of various obscurations, but it's there as potential. In the Vajrayana, we don't so much see it as the potential. We see it as, you could say, the actual reality, which is then the foundation for the entire path, what we then refer to as ground tantra. So there is difference whether we're approaching this from the sutra point of view or from the mantra point of view. Also, we'll talk about this in terms of when it's potential, we refer to it as Buddha nature. When it's fully blossomed, when it's fully, you could say, awakened, we refer to it as Dharmakaya, the unconfused, the body of absence of confusion altogether. This nature is not subject to the constructions of time, space, and so on. So we say, since Buddha nature is without beginning, it is present in the base, which we sometimes call ground, path, and fruit. The only difference between the three stages is that the base is the time when the Buddha nature is completely obscured by stains. The path is when it is partly purified, and the fruit is when it's completely purified. So these three stages then are what we refer to as sometimes samsara, nirvana, and the path. And that's where we can see when this nature is not clear, is just there in terms of being potential, completely obscured, when it's gradually being unveiled, and when it's completely manifest. Now, there's a teaching that we know as Ratna Gotra Vibhaga. And this is the teaching that's often known as the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Uttara Tantra also commonly referred to. And this teaching is one of the 5 doctrines of Maitreya. Now we're going to be looking at some of the other teachings that we have from Maitreya. It's not really that the subject matter is about Maitreya and his teachings, but it's more that they are these teachings that we have from Maitreya which reflect the particular view that's being made here. And that's where then the teaching of Buddha nature is, you could say, emphasized. Those of you who have been following Tsongtse Khyentse Rinpoche will remember that he gave a series of teachings over several years on the Uttara Tantra, and it's published. You can download it from the Khyentse Foundation website, and it's referred to as, simply known as, Buddha nature. That's how it's referred to. Yeah, Buddha nature. So here the Khenpo says, the Ratna Gotra Vibhaga gives 3 points of Mahayana doctrine that demonstrate all sentient beings have Tathagata Garbha. It lays out the doctrine of Tathagata Garbha under 10 headings, and it gives 9 examples from the Tathagata Garbha Sutra to illustrate how, although the Tathagata Garbha remains unchanged, the veils have to be removed. And again, if you look in Rinpoche's teachings and the Uttara Tantra Shastra itself, then we have these examples. For example, we would say, like the Buddha nature abides within us as something that is there, it's real, and yet we don't know it. And hence we give the example that of a poor person under whose you could say dwelling there is a hidden treasure. So in fact, the man shouldn't suffer, but at the same time, not knowing that the treasure is there, and the treasure is not like saying, hello, I'm here, then there is actually the situation of intense poverty, even though the man actually sits on a treasure. The other examples we have is a Buddha statue that's been covered in mud, the honey inside a beehive, the statue inside a mold, and so forth, all which illustrate how this nature is spontaneously present and yet not manifest, not perceived. So that's where, even though this nature is something that abides within us, it's veiled. So the Uttara Tantra Shastra then teaches 3 stages: the pure, the partly pure, and the completely pure, which correspond to beings, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas respectively. These correspond to the base, path, and fruit Tathagata-garbha. So that's where we can appreciate how our innate nature is pure, and yet not being manifest, then it is mixed up with our present conditions, and that's why we could assert our nature basically is pure. When we begin to practice the path, then we're acutely aware of the obscurations and essentially work with the obscurations. So that's where there's an awareness of how it's partly pure, and completely pure is then when these obscurations have been eliminated. So at first, ordinary beings do not recognize the clear light nature of mind at all. It is therefore covered with both gross and subtle veils. This is the base Tathagata-garbha, which is like gold when it is still in the gold ore. So the gross veils, these are the afflictions, the gross emotions, the kleshas. And the subtle veils, these are then the cognitive obscuration. So we talk about generally 2 or 4 kinds of obscurations, and these are then what veil this nature. So, you know, we could say we're very fortunate. We live in a place where there's gold ore, and yet we need to actually bring it out. We need to mine it. May blissful or heat experiences on the practitioner's path be understood then as manifestations of Buddha nature. Depends really. It can come about due to, you could say it really comes about due to certain circumstances in the Nadi, Prana, and Bindu. And while we do work with these on the path, then whether or not they are manifestations of Buddha nature is actually a subtle science. And it's a bit like also with dreams, where it says sometimes dreams are produced by wisdom, sometimes it's produced by karma. So so that's where, again, this is not certain. It depends. Depends really. If the practitioner abides within, you could say, a clear recognition of the absolute nature, then the spontaneous manifestation as such, you could say, reflects Buddha nature. But there are also ways of generating these kind of bliss and heat experiences, which are not necessarily connected with Buddha nature. Once the true nature of the mind has been recognized by the Bodhisattva, the gross veils fall away. Excuse me. So once the true nature of mind has been recognized by the Bodhisattva, the gross veils fall away. From then on, Bodhisattvas use their realization as the essence of the path, which consists of refining it as one refines gold once it has been separated from the ore. So this is what we sometimes refer to as the path of seeing. We have the path of accumulation, the beginning of the path, creating the conditions, the path of joining, where there begins to have. And interestingly, actually, we talk about then degrees of heat also, and this is on the path of joining that then eventually leads to clear recognition of the Bodhisattva, of the nature of mind, clearly understanding that, which is then what we call the path of seeing. And from that then follows the path of meditation. So that's then what takes the Bodhisattva to enlightenment, and then finally enlightenment itself we refer to as the path of no more learning. But from the point of recognizing nature of mind, then the Bodhisattvas have realization. This they dwell on, this they refine. And this is where then, in the context of the Shentong, we would say there is this recognition of luminosity, which then is asserted as something that's real, valid, and which becomes then the essence of the path. The final realization is the fruit, Tathagata-garbha, and is like the perfectly refined gold that has all the qualities of pure gold. The fruit Tathagata displays all the qualities of a perfectly enlightened Buddha. So in his hidden form, then we'll look at that. In the hidden form, it's Tathagata. When it's fully displayed, we talk about then the manifestation of the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhammakaya and the Rupakaya, the wisdom that is no longer being deluded, and also the compassionate manifestation to sentient beings. So the Ratna, Gotra Vibhaga, the first section, stands 154. So there are in the Ratna Gotra Vibhaga, there's 7 chapters, what we call the 7 Vajra points. So anyway, here then, it says, teaches that the element, and that's the term they use, come in Tibetan, Tathagata Gaba, they teach that this nature is empty of what is contingent. It's unconditional. And that's also why it's not held by dependent arising. It's not a dependent arising phenomenon. And we would say it is in fact emptiness itself, but it's the cognitive aspect of emptiness. It's that the nature which, when it's realized for what it is, rather it is through the recognition of emptiness, then we recognize the Tathagata Gaba. So this nature is empty of what is contingent, meaning the stains. And these that are separable, meaning the stains, they're external to this. This is the Shentong view, right? And this is also what we have in the Ratna Gotra Vibhaga, Uttara Tantra, that these are external. That's why we could say somebody can be delusional, and yet their essence is uncorrupted. And when they might get out of their delusion, then their already existing sanity, you could say, is restored. But what has been gotten rid of is the delusional moment. So that's what we would say, that's separable. We can get rid of that. Just like the example of the window, where we can say we clean the window, but we're actually not doing anything to the window. We're just removing what veils the window. The window remains. And that's then also where we would say this element, the Tathagata Gaba, that is actually not mixed up with the stains, just like the window is not mixed up with the dirt. So the stains are separable. They can be lost since they are not of its essence. So these are the stains are separable, but we would say it's empty of what is contingent. But he says, but it's not empty of our innate Buddha qualities that are not separable, since they are of its essence. All the qualities of enlightenment, they are intrinsic to our Buddha nature. They're there. And that's where again the Shentong would say those qualities, they're real. Now, then the Khenpo says our innate Buddha qualities are the qualities of the non-conceptual wisdom mind. It's not something we think up, it's non-conceptual, which when it is purified is called the Dhammakaya. When the wisdom mind is not purified, the qualities are not manifest, and it's called the Tathagata Gaba. So in that sense, this wisdom mind at the time of being a sentient being is referred to as the Tathagata Gaba. It's the Buddha nature. When it's purified, when it's manifest, then wisdom mind is the Dhammakaya. So these qualities of enlightenment, they're inseparable from that wisdom mind. They're not divisible from its essence, as if mind's essence were one thing and the qualities another. So that's where we can talk about the essence Dhammakaya. We also sometimes talk about the wisdom Dhammakaya. So it's not like the Dhammakaya is some sort of blank. It's just the absence of delusion, but it's rich, it's completely replete with every conceivable quality of enlightenment. So for example, this is also reflected if we look at the Vajrayana. There you see countless deities. And you wonder, we talk about countless mandalas in the secret mantra because the Dhammakaya is replete with countless qualities. So whether we engage it from one angle or another, we're essentially like a hologram. We're always coming back to the same nature. So that's where the mind essence, it possesses all these qualities. It's not as if these qualities are separate from mind essence. If they were like that, okay, so I'm just going to turn off the webcam. It says we have a slow connection here. So if they were separable, if they were other than the nature of mind itself, if they were like that, they would have to be shown to be empty of own nature by Madhyamika reason. But the nature is not like that. It doesn't exist as something that you could say like ordinary phenomena. So the essence would have to have arisen dependent on the qualities, and the qualities dependent on their essence. Then in that case, then that's where we say Madhyamika reason applying absolute analysis, that we would find that there's nothing there whatsoever. And we could say yes, to some extent, yes, and that's what the Rangtong Madhyamika, they actually will say. But what the Shentong there on what their point is in terms of the actual authentic experience, that's where the this Buddha nature is not something that's a construct. It's valid, you could say, experience. Such qualities or such an essence could not have any self-nature or true existence. However, the Buddha qualities are not like this. They cannot be grasped by the conceptual mind and are not separable from the essence of the wisdom mind, which also cannot be grasped by the conceptual mind. This we always hear, yeah? The absolute is not the scope of the intellect. So thus, the Buddha qualities are not compounded, or are they conditioned phenomena which arise, then stay, then perish. They are unconditional. They exist primordially. They have not come into existence as something that is an object or a conditioned phenomena, and hence they cannot cease also. So they exist in that primordial sense. Shentongpas is, and here of course it's important that we again recognize the Khenpo here is presenting this as really the culmination of all the various views and paths, or all the views. So it says, Shentongpas criticized the view of the other Madhyamikas who say that the Buddha's qualities arise as a result of the good deeds, vows, and connections made by bodhisattvas on the path to enlightenment. And this we very often hear, that there are those particular Madhyamikas who then would say, the activity of the Buddha depends on the conditions that they have laid down prior to enlightenment. The Shentongpas would say that enlightenment is in no way conditioned like that. And this also we see elsewhere. So there's a few sort of angles on this one here. Some would say that the Buddhas, they like this, they are sort of, their activity, the qualities are based on certain causes and conditions. Others would say that these are spontaneously present. So they would say, the Shentongpas would say, if these qualities arose in this way on the basis of, say, conditions, they would be compounded and impermanent phenomena and not beyond samsara. The whole point of Buddhism is that the Buddha is beyond samsara. Shentongpas accept the doctrine of the Tathagata Sutras, that the Buddha qualities are primordially existent. So that's where the Tathagata Sutras, they would say all the qualities of enlightenment spontaneously there, have always been there, never go away. They're unconditioned. But of course they concede, they accept that good deeds, vows, and connections, meaning tendril, creating the conditions for the success on the path, are necessary for removing veils. So it's not as if they fall into some sort of extreme where they would simply say, there's no need to do anything. They very much advocate the gradual path in which the conditions for enlightenment need to be there. But what is unveiled already spontaneously possesses all enlightenment qualities. Now, the Khenpo says both the Chittamatrans, who we looked at, right? Those who were discussed in terms of the three natures and who assert the absolute nature of the reflexive awareness. both the Chittamatrans and the Rangtong Madhyamikas who have a philosophical view. And again, there are those Rangtong Madhyamikas. There's different Rangtong Madhyamikas. And so we do have Rangtong Madhyamikas that to some extent actually accept some of the points that the Shentongpas make. Anyway, those who have a philosophical view, and that's also those that would say that the qualities of a Buddha is something that is accumulated on the basis of conditions. So these Chittamatrans and the Rangtong Madhyamikas, they think of the Buddha's wisdom as a stream of moments of purified awareness that has emptiness or the conceptionless nature as its subtle object. Okay, so this is where there's a knower of something that is uncorrupted, and then the Khenpo says, since the object is pure, the awareness itself exhibits the qualities of a pure mind, and this is called jnana. Its arising is associated automatically with the qualities of the Buddha that results from the actions of the Bodhisattva on his path to enlightenment through his accumulation of wisdom and merit. So that's jhana and punya. Therefore, whether they express this view explicitly or not, the Rangtong Madhyamikas who have a view, and again, this is emphasis on who have a view, who have a particular, you could say, conception. And it's not all Rangtongs necessarily that have that. They regard the Buddha qualities as relative phenomena whose essence is emptiness. Do I understand correctly then that in the view of the Shentongpa, it is not the causes and conditions that give rise to the qualities of pure mind, but that only when the veils are removed that such qualities arise spontaneously? That's right. They emphasize causes and conditions for the practice of eliminating the veils. So that's where they definitely have a path as such. But that's right. On the basis of it, say removing the veils, then they appreciate they would say the qualities, they are not even that they arise spontaneously, but they are already there. We would say it's a bit like that. They give one of the 9 examples we have in the Uttara Tantra is that you have a statue in a mold, and when you remove the mold, the statue is there complete with everything. And so similarly also then the qualities of enlightenment are perfectly present. Yeah. As has been mentioned already above, Shentongpas do not accept the view, so do not accept that the wisdom mind knows in a dualistic way. So we're talking about up here that those who would say that there is a mind that is aware of purity. So this is ascribed to these conditions. Shentongpas do not these particular say tenets or schools of view. As been mentioned above, Shentongpas do not accept that the wisdom mind knows in a dualistic way. It does not divide into a knowing and a known aspect. So there is no subtle object of the wisdom mind. It is not a stream of moments of awareness. It is completely unbounded and free from all concepts, including time and space. Therefore, it is primordially existent, like its qualities. So that's you could say, the Shentong view in terms of this unconditional wisdom mind. Okay, so the doctrine of the Mahayana Sutralamkara. Again, this is one of these works in which we have, I think, several translations. We have from Padmakara, and we also have from someone else, I forget. Forget who the other one is. Anyway, yeah. But I think both these translations they were done under the one was Padmakara, the other I think was done by Chikinima Rinpoche's translation group. Anyway, yeah, the Dhammachakra translation committee. Anyway, the Mahayana Sutralamkara, which is it's particularly with the commentaries, is a rather large work. And then here, Khenpo just mentions this. He says, this is another of the 5 treatises that the Tibetan tradition attributes to Maitreya. The Mahayana Sutra Alamkara teaches a distinction between the Dharmin and the Dharmata. The Dharmin, Che, is a general term that refers to that which has the particular quality of Dharma under discussion. So this is essentially what we would call dualistic. This is a subject of dualistic mind. The object that is then, you'd say, rather the phenomenon that is objectified and labeled in a particular way. In this context, the relative mind is the Dharmin that has as its essence the Dharmata, the quality under discussion. So here we understand that in terms of relative experience, but within the core of relative experience, there is Dharmata. So it says here, Dharmata means that which is the true nature, the absolute clear light mind. So again, this is uncorrupted, and there's something that needs to be removed for us to experience it. So again, this is again sort of runs as a theme, the theme of the Shentong perspective. Thus, says the Khenpo, the relative mind is the thing that is empty of something. Tongshi. This is the ground for elimination of the ground for what is empty. It is empty of self-nature. Its real nature is the absolute clear light. So it's empty of self-nature in the sense of it's empty of delusion, but is not empty of non-delusion, the clear light nature. According to the Shenpong Tongpas, the clear light mind in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara is the same as Tathagata Gaba in the Ratnagotra Vibhaga. The relative mind is what is referred to as the stains in the Ratnagotra Vibhaga. However, the Ratnagotra Vibhaga does not explicitly say the true nature of the stains is Tathagata Gaba. It just says they're empty of self-nature. Thus, there is a slight difference in the layout, but the meaning is the same. So that's where there's slightly different wording in terms of that the Uttara Tantra Shastra or the Ratnagotra Vibhaga does not say directly that the true nature of the stains is the Tathagata Gaba. It refers to it as something that needs to be eliminated. But it again comes down to the same thing, that within the, you could say, veiled condition of consciousness, the core abides as Buddha nature or as the clear light nature. So, same difference. Okay. Oh no, no audio. Again. Can you hear me now? Oh, it's good. It's back. How long time was it gone for? I have this very good new mic, but it's giving me a few, I'm having a few issues with it. How long time are we? A couple of sentences. Okay. All right. All right. Well, there's a fair amount of, you could say, going over the same theme again and again. So I think you'd probably be all right. But if not, let me know. Okay. Then there's another text, which is called the Majanta Vibhaga, Uttanamshe. What is, you could say, the center, and what is the you could say, the periphery. There's another of the 5 treatises of Maitreya. This text is interpreted by Shentongpas as alluding to the following doctrine, which is found clearly expounded in the Samdhi Mochana Sutra. And the Sandhya Nirmochana Sutra is a really important sutra. Actually, it's the teaching, you could say, one of the principal teachings of the Yogacarya. And it's also in there we have the teachings on the three turnings of the wheel. We have the teachings on the three natures. And it bothers me, I can't remember because it's been translated by 84,000 recently. It was translated very capably, actually, by John Powers, what is known as the Buddha's wisdom, the wisdom of the Buddha. And also then recently it was translated by the 84,000. Anyway, it's a very important sutra. Gompa Ngedral Kido in Tibetan. So we have the three modes of existence, the three modes of emptiness, and the three modes of absence of essence. And this is where we're going to go over the three natures. Remember, there's the nature of. Let me just see if I have my little. Do I have it here now? Let's see. Oh yeah, I think I did. Okay, here we go. All right. You might remember this one here. And this is where, but this is probably good to just go over that presently. Let's see here. This apparently is a garden in Vancouver, in case you were wondering. Some park. Looks very nice. Okay, so we have these three natures. Remember, we have basically all of this entire block here. Yeah, this entire block is what we understand as dependent nature, because it can go nirvana, samsara, it can go nirvana. So that's where when it's held by the imaginary nature, when it's held by confusion, then it's essentially has this impure condition. It's dualistic. But as we practice the path, that's what's indicated down here, practice of the path, and gradually it diminishes, and gradually the purity of experience becomes manifest. Until then, there's complete enlightenment, which is then what we refer to as the perfectly existent nature. So these three natures we understand as the way in which you could say, understand samsara, nirvana, and the path. Kindly explain the difference between Dharmata and Dharmakaya. Dharmata really just means the way things are. And that's just actual reality. Dharmakaya means when the Tathagata Garbha becomes fully manifest, then you could say the subject, the wisdom, is no longer deluded. So you could say Dharmata is how things are, and Dharmakaya is when we realize the Dharmata. So put it sort of that way. So then the Khenpo says, let's see. Okay, so then Khenpo says, with regards to these three natures, yeah, there's three modes of existence, three modes of emptiness, and three modes of absence of essence. Okay, now I have to confess, this is material that's new for me, so I'm studying this with you. So we'll just read this carefully. So that's where first three modes of existence. The imaginary nature, okay, remember the imaginary nature, exists as mere conceptual creations. This is the projections of delusion. It is the objects that our concepts and ideas refer to. For example, since the real tiger in a dream is non-existent, it is merely a figment of the imagination. In other words, the imaginary nature, which refers to the contents of the delusion, rather than the delusion itself, exists only in the imagination of the referent names and concepts. So it's not so much that there's a basic condition of delusion, but it's more that we're projecting phenomena out there. We're seeing tigers, we're seeing things that are not real. We're having delusional objects. So that's then the content. So for example, we talk about past events. Now these events do not exist at all. They are simply names or concepts for referring to things that are being imagined, but which do not exist. Now, this is a very provocative perspective, actually, but it's valid, and this is where we should be grateful, actually, that somebody comes along and says this. We think of the past as real. The past has absolutely no existence. We can even be cheeky and says that the past has never been experienced. There has never ever been a valid, you could say, knowledge of the past. The past is entirely something that is created by concepts. Objects external to the mind and senses are of this nature. That's what we similarly refer to all the objects that we're perceiving. This is where we can, again, and this is a point that Vasubandhu, he makes already at the level of the Sutrantika teachings, which is actually that we know everything is just a field of, you could say, subtle particles. We don't even need to go into emptiness, but just merely the subtle particles. And then in that we know that is what there's there. We know that the phenomena are entirely created by the subject. This is again something where there's a parallel between physics, neuroscience, and also what is being stated here. They do not exist. These objects external to the mind and the senses are of this nature. They do not exist, and yet names and concepts are applied to them. So this is the imaginary nature in terms of understanding the three modes of existence. So the first is that it's entirely imaginary. There's nothing there. The dependent nature substantially exists. So this is where we could say, well, we have a mind. That we seem to be able to, this we can probably agree on. And Tsesuyuba means it has substance. So it has substance in the sense that it is not just imaginary in the above sense. Thus, the thoughts, concepts, names, and ideas themselves that appear both to the mind and in it do actually occur. They're creating hallucinations, if you like, but they are the agents that effectively do this. For example, the dream tiger occurs and produces an effect such as fear in the dreaming mind. However, the dream tiger is only substantial in relation to the real tiger that is imagined to be there. It is not substantial in an absolute sense. So from the Shentong point of view, it is not enough just to refute the true existence of the imaginary nature. Shentong has used Madhyamika reason to refute the true existence of the dependent nature as well as of the imaginary nature. So that's where we would say that from the Madhyamika perspective, which the Shentong appreciate, then even this notion of real tiger and so forth, all of these actually are entirely just dependently arisen phenomena. They have no real existence. So that's where they are, Madhyamikans. So in terms of the appearance that is generated, both in terms of the object of real tiger, but also in terms of the mind that we're discussing here, this dependent nature is ultimately non-existent. So it has a conventional value, but not a true existence, not an absolute ultimate value. So the perfect existent nature. So remember that they accept that Buddha nature exists, but the relative mind, which is this dependent nature, they refute. They would say that has no reality. And that's again where they are Madhyamikans. So the perfectly existent nature truly exists because it exists in a non-conceptual way. So it's not a construct. It's not an object of the ordinary confused mind. It is the wisdom itself. That's valid. Of course, we could say, yes, why otherwise, why bother? If enlightenment wasn't for real, then why bother? So from that perspective, we would say the perfectly existent nature, it has true existence. So the previous one is not, but this one has. In the Chittamatra, the perfectly existent nature is said to be mere emptiness. in the sense of freedom from the conceptual process of distinguishing outer perceived objects as different in substance to the inner perceiving mind. So that's where they would assess, they would say this non-dual nature is the emptiness nature. Shentongpas, they say it is non-conceptual wisdom mind itself. That's what we've already established. This is replete with all the qualities of enlightenment, all the Buddha qualities. It is indeed empty of the conceptual process of distinguishing outer perceived objects as different in substance to the inner perceiving minds. It is also empty of the conceptualizing process that create appearances of a divided consciousness, vijnana, a stream of discrete moments of consciousness with perceiving and perceived objects. It is completely free of any conceptualizing process and knows in a way that is completely foreign to the conceptual mind. It is completely unimaginable, unimaginable, in fact. So that's where you say this nature is beyond anything that we can conceptualize. But that's also, this is the Shentongpas would say, that is the lifeblood. That is the nature to which the sage awakens. And the sage has a valid insight, right? So that's why they would say, that is why it can be said to truly exist. So that's what they would refer to as the perfectly existent mind. So while we would basically say that they have a slightly larger view on this perfectly existent nature than the Chitta Matran. Oh no, the audio dropped off again. Okay, I'm turning off the webcam. Okay. So anyway, yes. So we have this, and these are then the three modes of existence, referring to then the ways in which we understand then the three natures, the imaginary, dependent, and truly existent nature. Now the three modes of emptiness. The imaginary nature is empty in the sense that it does not exist at all. Now we're talking about emptiness. So it doesn't, the imaginary nature, all the labels, the things that we think exist out there, the content of our delusional mind, this nature, this experience is empty in the sense that it does not exist at all. It is the emptiness of something non-existent. It's never come into existence as such. The reference of names and concepts, the conceived objects themselves, never exist except in the imagination. They have no self-nature of their own. So they are said to be empty in and of themselves. That's fair enough. We kind of agree on that, I think. Some Shentong masters say that the emptiness taught by the Rangtong is nothing more than this. In other words, they do not regard it as being the ultimate emptiness taught by the Shentongpas. So that's where the emptiness of concepts, labels, and so forth, then some would say that there are Rangtong teachers who would just say, you could say absence of inherent existence, absence of anything real, that's it. That's what is the ultimate nature. But the Shentongpas, they of course say that the ultimate nature, the ultimate emptiness and so forth is a lot more than that. It possesses all what we call the supreme qualities of enlightenment. So the dependent nature. So this is discussing again, the fine points around how we understand emptiness in regards to these three natures. The dependent nature is empty in the sense of something existent, but not ultimately existent. So that's where conventionally we talk about this mind. Yes, that's fair enough, but it's not something that has ultimate existence. And again, this is where the Shentongpas, after all, they are Madhyamikas. They don't accept the truly existent, the truly existent mind. In the relative, it exists, functions. That's also where they agree actually with the Chittamarchans in terms of talking about the relative functioning of the ordinary mind. It has its own characteristics. There's an experience. It is empty of imaginary nature, but not empty of itself. So again, there's conventional reality. This is like the Chittamarchan view. In absolute terms, according to the Shentong view, the dependent natures does not exist at all. So that's where they're Madhyamikans, but they agree with the Chittamarchans in terms of its conventional existence. It is empty of self-nature because it is dependently arising. So, fair enough. However, the appearance of the dependent nature is only possible because, in essence, all appearance is the mind's clear nature. And this does exist ultimately. So that's where we would say that there is a clear light nature that when it is filtered through confusion, it projects solidity. And there's an appearance, a conventional appearance of a mind, but then again, it's that nature does not have any absolute reality. But the appearance, the appearance which has no ultimate reality, that takes place due to this clear light nature of the mind. In some way, and if we go back to this sort of the scheme before, we can see what we're actually saying is that this nature, or the nature that we're talking about here, the dependent nature, its underlying nature is clear light. You see, it has this, we would say this is the real. From the Shentong view, all of this is real. It's veiled by the impure dependent nature. And so it's, as it becomes more manifest, then conventionally there is the perceptions of all the various phenomena as such as a dependent nature, even though ultimately it doesn't exist. It's that sort of clarity or the pure light, the vibrant or luminous nature of the abiding ground that when filtered in confusion appears conventionally as a dependent nature. So the Shentong, they provide a bit more explanation in terms of the appearance nature. So with regards to the perfectly existent nature, that is the ultimate absolute emptiness. It is the non-conceptual wisdom mind, non-arising, non-abiding, non-perishing. It's beyond coming and going, if you like. Those of you who attend the Sword of Wisdom study in the morning that was happening today, remember there's Adya Nagarjuna who would say this nature is beyond birth, it's beyond death, it's beyond coming, going, and so forth. So it's beyond arising, beyond abiding, it's beyond perishing. So we say it is primordially existent, endowed with qualities. It is empty in the sense that it's free from all the obscurations created by the conceptual mind. Therefore, when the conceptual mind tries to grasp it, it finds nothing. So it experiences it as emptiness. So that's when we apply what we call absolute analysis. Then we say, oh, there's nothing to phenomena. And that's where we say, oh, then there's emptiness. Thus, it is empty to the conceptual mind, right? So the ordinary mind, ordinary pedestrian mind, says, okay, phenomena that I'm perceiving, if I analyze them, they have no reality. The nature of phenomena is such that nothing can be found. They would then settle into a conceptual idea of non-existence. The Shentongpas, they would say, sorry, but that kind of understanding is really just undertaken on the basis of the confused mind that sees there's nothing there. It's the confused mind that is still labeling emptiness. It becomes a concept of emptiness. And that's where they would say the nature, the ultimate nature itself, has no notion of emptiness, something that is constructed, any notion of anything whatsoever. And that nature itself possesses all the, you could say, it has the power that you could say is, when it's understood, are all the qualities of enlightenment. When it's not understood, it becomes all the appearances of samsara. That's why that's an important point, because otherwise we would say, well, where does everything come from? That's where it's important to say, there's, to, you could say, appreciate the perspective that understands how the ultimate nature really exists in terms of this luminosity. This is a biggie, and of course, you have here a very ordinary being just presenting this, and this, of course, is the subject matter of, for example, the sutras such as the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra, and this is, of course, what's also implicit in all the subtlety of the teachings that we have in the Great Perfection, and also the teachings of Mahamudra. But this is an important point, and it is also where sometimes we hear Tsongtse Khenpo Rinpoche quote the Prajnaparamita, where it says, and we see this quoted very often, he says, mind, the nature of mind, sorry, mind, there is no mind. The nature of mind is luminosity. And these refer to the three turnings of the wheel. First, there's mind. The key creator of all experience is mind, and that's where we need to understand the nature of suffering, how it originates, and so forth. The Four Noble Truths has to do with the mind. So that's where the key focal point really of what the Buddha understood is where the confusion of samsara originates is on the basis of mind. Now, this mind is not something that has any reality, and that's what we then establish at it. So the first turning of the wheel, that is, you could say, the teachings on the Four Noble Truths. The second turning of the wheel is the teachings on emptiness. And the third turning of the wheel is then the teachings on Buddha nature, and that sometimes also refers to what we call the wheel of luminosity. That's the teaching that deals with the clear light nature of mind. Okay, the three modes of absence of essence. I think I'll leave that to next time. These are big topics. Is that all right? Any questions? We'll definitely seek out and read the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra. Yes, please do. Please do. And let's consider this, what we're doing here, a seed, really, in terms of us pursuing the subtlety of the path. But it actually provides a lot of explanation. So please understand, really, in terms of what we've been looking at here, is gradually increasing valid insight into emptiness, and that this emptiness doesn't just leave us with nothing, but it really is, you could say, a gateway into a much greater reality that possesses then this luminous nature that is the subject matter of the Shentong Madhyamika. So, and that's also where the Shentong Madhyamika, I think we looked at it earlier, their critique really is that it's very important that we look at these three natures in terms of understanding how appearances play out and how we should understand the approach, the understanding of the absolute nature. So even though we don't have the direct experience, we can have some idea, where's this all going? What are we going to experience? And if we just think, oh, well, the absolute nature is just, there's nothing there, then that would be a little bit of a you could say a little bit sort of exaggerating emptiness, so to speak. So that's where we don't want to get too carried away, because then there's the conceptual production of emptiness that really veils the actual experience. Yeah, I'm glad if we're doing a good sales job on the Shentong view. Yeah, there's a lot of good to be said about that. But those of you who are following the Jamgön Kongtrul teachings will also see that actually the thing you like about the Shentong actually can also be accommodated through the Rangtong. But actually, this is something we'll be looking at tomorrow night. So I hope you're following that study as well. But ultimately, remember, it works beautifully within the actual experience of wisdom. So you have, for example, Jamgön Kongtrul, who was a Shenton master, and you also have Jamgön Rinpoche, who was a Rangtong master, and they both students of Jamgön Kongtrul Lodrötaye, where Jamgön Kongtrul here actually also says it, but we in the Khenpo camp we usually quote Jamgön Kongtrul Lodrötaye as saying, when you're establishing the view, the Rangtong, you could say the non-grasping view, is very important to understand that nothing can be grasped. But then again, in terms of the practice of the path, and you could say the conventional, authentic experience of luminosity, non-delusion, is what we want to emphasize at the time of the path. But of course, again, ultimately, this results in something that is entirely beyond anything that can be grasped. And as such, there's sort of a beautiful harmony between the Shentong and the Rangtong, if properly understood. It all comes down to then really the point of view of the non-conceptual wisdom, non-dual, non-conceptual wisdom. So thank you for joining me here and patiently putting up with me taking a lot of big words in my mouth. I've been stretching my mouth to make these big words come out. And so really just in terms of trying to do service to the matter here, which is incredibly valuable. Thank you very much for joining me in this study. So good. Let's conclude with the dedication. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish, ever more and more. So next time will be the last. I think we only have a few pages left, really. Let's see here. Yeah. At the end, there's a little bit of a conclusion basically happens here, but then there's a little bit of explanation of some key terms that I thought we could go over. And also this will sort of become the point of departure in case you have some questions about some of the topics. So that's where we're going to meet next time. So the emptiness of the three modes of existence, was that it? I think so. Yes, that's where we are. So look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much. Prego. Piacere.